Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very good essay that reminds us all of what can happen, and I believe will happen here in the United States. The correlations between what Marat K., a man who grew up during the collapse of the Soviet Union, and what has been occurring here in the United States should give us some foresight. Before I begin, I would like to remind my Patreon and Ladies and Gentlemen's Club members that this will be the entry video for the monthly giveaway of 4 1-ounce American Silver Eagles. 2 will go to 2 Patreon members and 2 will go to 2 Ladies and Gentlemen Club members. So please remember to leave a comment. I hope that you enjoy this essay. It is very enlightening and I believe tells us what's going to happen here and in other Western nations that have abused the power of the printer. When I was a kid growing up in the Soviet Union, it was essentially forbidden to make a better life for yourself. You couldn't just decide to go back to school, start a business, or switch careers to a thriving new industry. And it didn't matter how hard you worked. You were almost likely never going to be promoted. All of the top jobs in the Soviet Union were reserved for party loyalists. The government removed every possible economic incentive to achieve more, which is why service was pitiful, technology was lagging, and the Soviet economy was consistently in the dumps. Now, on occasion, the government would decide that they wanted to populate certain rural areas of Russia, such as remote parts of Siberia. Quite often, families were simply ordered to pick up and move, as was famously the cause under Stalin. But by the 1970s, the government would provide a small financial incentive for families if they moved to Siberia. You could earn a slightly higher salary. This became literally the only way that anyone could legally make more money in the Soviet Union. And that's how my parents and I ended up moving to a cold little town in western Siberia in 1985. The plan was to stay there for a few years, save money, and then move back to a nicer, bigger city in Russia with a better climate. The fact that our new Siberian town didn't have a single restaurant, cinema, or even an ice cream place made the saving money part really easy. My parents followed through on their plan, and by the early 1990s, they had saved enough money to buy a decent house, plus a car, and still have some savings left over. But then the unimaginable happened. The Soviet Union collapsed and the economy crashed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where it gets very interesting because what he goes through next is what's happening now in the United States. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, history doesn't repeat itself, but it quite often rhymes. Inflation, then hyperinflation followed as the government started printing money like crazy in an effort to continue making interest payments on its debt. Prices skyrocketed. At some point, stores stopped displaying price signs. Why bother if they were doubling every other week or so? Salaries and pensions did not keep up with inflation. Almost everyone became more poor with each passing day. Does that sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Our government's been printing money like crazy. Has your salary been keeping up with inflation? I would say no. Not for at least the 95 to 98% of the people in the United States has their salary been keeping up with inflation. Most people, including my parents, were caught completely unprepared. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's what's going to happen this time around. Even though all of the signs are out there for everyone to see, most people live a life of normalcy and don't think that this will ever happen because we live in the United States of America. The general level of financial literacy at the time was pitiful. Most Russians didn't know the first thing about money, finance, or economics, so no one knew how to react to the hyperinflation that was unfolding in front of our very eyes. Does that sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? And listen, it is not the fault of the average American that they are not educated in economics or finances. It is the way that the system was set up to keep us ignorant of the things that really matter in our lives and can allow us to have a better standard of living. They don't want us to have a better standard of living. They want to equalize our standard of living, not only within the United States, but throughout the world. It was as if everyone was frozen in disbelief, including my parents. By 1990, before the crisis, my parents had saved 50,000 rubles. At the time, that would have been enough to buy a house and a car. After a few years of crisis, my parents still had the same 50,000 rubles, but by then, all they could afford to buy with it was a pair of winter boots for my mother. I wonder what would have happened if they would have taken that 50,000 rubles when it still had purchasing power and bought a little bit of gold or silver. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what's going to happen to most Americans. I'm not a financial advisor, okay? Do your own homework. But I'm telling you that this here is what's going to happen to most Americans. Their entire nest egg has been completely inflated away in a few short years. But not everyone has lost during that time. Those who successfully navigated the financial Wild West of the 1990s in Russia turned this crisis into the opportunity of their lifetime. For example, I remember seeing ads in newspapers offering to exchange a flat in Moscow for a poor quality Soviet car. It was an unbelievable trade when you think about it. The guy with the apartment was probably panicking and trying to leave the country, so he thought it would be a good idea to trade his apartment for a car. But 10 years later, the car was a worthless pile of scrap. Meanwhile, the owner of the flat still held a valuable asset that had appreciated significantly in value and kept up with inflation. And naturally, the savviest people were able to buy extremely high-quality assets on the cheap, like real estate and businesses, including shares of newly privatized oil companies. Investing in Gazprom in the early 1990s was like buying Bitcoin in 2010. Later, these people became known as Russian oligarchs. Now, I'm not writing this to suggest that the same financial catastrophe will take place in the U.S. or in Europe. After all, the ruble didn't enjoy the status of being the world's reserve currency in the early 1990s, and the economy of the late Soviet Union was already in terrible shape. Still, this very recent history should serve as a reminder. Idiotic economic policies almost always have consequences. When a government goes out of its way to destroy economic incentives through higher taxes or abusive regulations, bad things usually happen. And ladies and gentlemen, higher taxes are not merely just higher taxes, like charging you a higher tax rate. Remember that inflation is a hidden tax. When a government accumulates a mountain of debt that is impossible to pay, bad things usually happen. When a central bank conjures trillions of dollars out of thin air, bad things usually happen. And I can tell you from personal experience that when a society actively embraces a communist ideology, bad things usually happen. And all of these issues in North America and Europe certainly could create consequences for the dollar and the euro someday. And that day, ladies and gentlemen, is coming. Don't ask me exactly when, but that day is coming. This isn't a dire prediction, it's just common sense, something that most politicians seem to be lacking these days. It's important to think about risks and consequences and prepare for them in advance. I watched my parents lose their entire nest egg and became victims of other people's stupidity because they were unprepared. But today we have access to so much more information and education. We can learn about how gold and silver have maintained their value against inflation for thousands of years. We can learn about other assets, whether productive land, cryptocurrency, or profitable business ventures that could do well even in times of crisis. And we can make a plan B, just in case the unthinkable happens, because if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that absolutely anything is possible. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Take it from the man himself, Murat K., which is the person that this essay was about. He lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union. He saw what happened before, and he saw what happened after. And what did I say, ladies and gentlemen? Many, many times have I said this in previous videos. What happened in the Soviet Union wasn't just a collapse, but it was a reset. It was a reset of their system. And whenever a reset of a system happens, especially in government, mainly in government. Who is it that loses? It's the average person like you and I. It's the average person that did not have the time to educate themselves on the economy, on the financial system. And like I said before, I don't blame the average person. The average man and woman in this country and in most Western countries are just trying to keep on that one rung of the ladder, on that first rung of the ladder of success, trying to keep a home over their family's head, trying to keep a meal on the table, trying to keep clothes and shoes on their children. That's what the average person is worried about. They don't have time to come home and research the economy or financials or the financial system. They're just trying to survive. But this has been done to us on purpose, ladies and gentlemen, because whenever there is a reset, and there will be one, they may not call it a reset, they may call it a reset, I don't know. And those that are in the know, they will know what to do prior. And you will be stuck with nothing but worthless debt notes that are now called the U.S. Federal Reserve note or the U.S. dollar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. Keep preparing, because we will see higher inflations as the months and years go on, and eventually we will see hyperinflation. Unless we default on our loans, unless the United States defaults on its loans, we will see hyperinflation. That's why they want to come out with this digital dollar, because coming out with a digital dollar is the only way that they can go to negative interest rates. Meaning what? That they're going to take more of your money. Negative interest rates means that your dollars will become worth even less than they are now. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining in today. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Do your homework, ladies and gentlemen. Stock up on everything that you need to stock up on. I personally don't like to leave any dollars on the table. I have a small emergency fund. I have a little bit of cash in the house just in case the banks close and the ATMs don't work or credit cards don't work, like just happened this weekend. Just look it up. But everything else I like to turn into real assets that will maintain their value over time and protect my purchasing power. Many blessings to all of you and your families. This is Alaska Prepper. I am out.